Alright, hello everybody, NTC here, and I'm here today to start a new series. And the series is going to focus on the Overwatch League and its teams. And I'm going to talk about each team, both new and returning, and go over their roster. If it's a returning team, the changes they made to their roster, how I think that compares to their previous team. If it's a team that's made a lot of changes, one change, whatever. For the new teams, I'll talk about the roster, how I think it looks compared to a lot of the other teams, whatever knowledge I have on the team, what I can kind of figure out about the team. But we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping to do 2 videos a week, Monday and Friday. We're going to start from the bottom of the table based on regular season standings, as you could probably tell from the fact that this video is about the Shanghai Dragons. And we'll go, so we'll do Shanghai through New York, and then it'll be the expansion teams, and that'll be alphabetical, so it'll be Atlanta through Washington, D.C. So that won't be something we need to worry about for several weeks. Hopefully by then all the team names have been announced and rosters have been announced by then. If they haven't, then I'm just going to hold off on those videos. But that's not what we need to worry about yet. What we need to worry about now is the Shanghai Dragons. Let's jump into it. Let's jump into the Shanghai Dragons. Let's talk about this Shanghai Dragons roster. Now, if you didn't follow the Overwatch League at all in its first season, then, well, you might not know about the Shanghai Dragons. But even if you didn't, you probably do know about the Shanghai Dragons. Shanghai Dragons went 0-40. They did not win a single game. Their primarily Chinese roster didn't play as well as I think people had thought they would and had hoped they would. I don't think anyone expected any team to not win a single game, but they did not win a single game. Mid-season, they signed 4 different South Korean players in hopes that they would help the team improve. And while they helped somewhat, it didn't lead the team to any wins. So when the season ended and the time to cut players came in early September, they made a lot of changes. Their team had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players, and they cut 8 of them, including a couple of South Korean players. They kept 3, obviously. They kept Dia, who is a DPS player from China, the only Chinese player that they kept. He is a mostly hit scan player from what I've seen of him last season. He'll be interesting. His hero pool, I'll get back to it again later in terms of what it's like with some of the other players on the team. But he has he's got Widowmaker, he's got Doomfist. Those are the kinds of heroes he plays. McCree plays a little bit of Tracer, so he'll be playing a decent amount. And then they kept Fearless, who is a main tank player, South Korean main tank player. He's kind of aggressive, and it caused some issues for the team last year, but he's solid. Because he is a main tank that can do the job he needs to do. Main tank is a very important role. It's probably the most important role in the Overwatch League and just in competitive Overwatch in general. And he is very good as a main tank. Winston is who he plays the most, but obviously with the way the meta is changing, I'm sure he can play some Reinhardt, play some Orisa, whoever they need to play. And then they also have Geggery, who is the off-tank, well-known Zarya player. She is the only female player in the Overwatch League. She played D.Va a lot because D.Va is really big in the meta, but she's also well known for Zarya play. which is really good. And I'll get to it in a second why that's good when we get to some of the other players. But those are the 3 players returning, all of whom I think are fantastic players with Overwatch League experience, which you can't really overlook that. You can't really replicate that on stage Overwatch League experience. Contenders has some big things if you're in like Contenders finals and whatnot, or you play the World Cup. But the Overwatch League is kind of its own thing. So that's the team that remained, the 3 players that remained. They also released a bunch of their coaches, whatnot, and then signed a new head coach, which is Blue Has. I don't know how his name's actually pronounced because the H and the S are capitalized, so I don't actually know how he pronounces it. Blue Has, Blue Has, Blue Ha-S. I don't know. But he is the former head coach of Chengdu Panthera. He was also a player. He played for WNV Teamwork as a player, and as a coach, he coached for most recently, and I believe where he actually did coach for most of his career, if not all of his coaching career, with Chengdu Panthera. Chengdu Panthera is a Korean contenders team in South Korea. They are I'd say one of the best South Korean contenders teams. This past season, season 2 of contenders in South Korea, 2018, they got 2nd place. The season before that, they finished in the top 8, losing to Runaway in playoffs. Who Runaway, if you don't know, is a crazy good team, and they always do well. So I think it's a good signing, especially because Chengdu Panthera is a very good team. They got 2nd place in Contenders Season 2 this past season in Korea. They only lost 1 game, and it was the finals. 8 maps against Runaway. 8 maps against possibly the best team in all of Korean contenders. It's a very, very, very solid team, and they're bringing in the coach who led them to that solid finish, which means probably some pretty good things for this team, because I think they brought in a very competent and very experienced head coach. Someone who has experience with big stages and big tournaments, and he played on a team that found success. And when you play on a team that has success, it's probably not a bad idea to have some of those players, which is exactly what they have done. The Chengdu Panthera roster consisted of, I believe, 7 players this past season, and 6 of them have been signed to Overwatch League teams. That's how good of a roster we're talking about here. A roster where 1 player from that team isn't on an Overwatch League team. And the guy who isn't is someone that didn't start playing with Chengdu Panthera until April. Everyone else played in November of last year. So we're talking about a solid team here. Sorry about that. I don't know why I said that for so long. But we're talking about a really good team here, with a lot of talent. So let's talk about some of that talent, because the Shanghai Dragons have signed 4 of those players to their roster from Chengdu Panthera. So we're going to start with the supports. They signed both Koma and Luffy to the team. Luffy has recently been playing mostly Zenyatta and Moira. Koma has mostly been playing the Mercy and Lucio duties, but they both have Anas that they can play. So this is a really good signing for them, right? You have a head coach with his back line that he knows, that have experience, that have played together, that can shot call, all this other stuff. Like, that's really, really big. That's really big for head coach. He can rely on them. He knows their abilities. He knows what they're doing, and they've done well. Luffy played his entire career with the Kongdu organization. It's not necessarily just Kongdu Panthera, but he's always been on a Kongdu team. Um, and that's really solid. That's a good thing to have. A player who has that kind of history with a good organization, with a big organization like that. Um, and your back line's super important. Your support line's super important. If they're going to be shot calling, you need good shot callers. And I think that they have two very solid shot callers in Coma and Luffy. Sorry if you can hear that. That is the shuttle. Um, that's really big. Like that's just huge. Getting two solid supports that played for a coach like that, you cannot, you really cannot understate that. Um, they will probably be the shot callers. They're gonna have a lot of work to do to keep obviously the rest of their team alive, but we'll see how they do. Two other Kongdu Pantheras that they signed, Kongdu Panthera players that they signed. They have the flex DPS player D-Ding, and then Youngjin. And Youngjin is been playing a lot of Brigitte recently, which is really big in the current meta. So that's really good for them. D-Ding is a little bit more interesting. He has some diva play. He's his hero pools are kind of weird. He plays primarily your projectile heroes. Um, like Pharah, and he has a solid Pharah, but he's also a good diva player. So he has obviously some flexibility, which is really good in the current meta. If you need a Pharah, right, well then you just throw this guy on Pharah, and then if you need to switch and you need to run triple tank, whatever, you can just have him switch to diva, or whatever. You're gonna Geggery on Zarya. You have a lot of things you can do with a player with a flexible hero pool like that. That's why flex players are super important. But the Diva's gonna be interesting, especially because he. I don't even know what I was. Flexibility is important because if you can flex to different roles, it gives you more options with team compositions and heroes that you can have in a game, and that's really useful. So I mean, this guy who played on a roster that also produced Badoshin from the London Spitfire, which would be the WNV KR roster. It's interesting that he is a flexible player, and depending on what they need out of him, he'll be a very good player to have. I'm sure both D-Ding and Youngjin will play a decent amount. It just comes down to what. Obviously, because when you have that triple tank, triple support, you'd probably be putting in Youngjin on Brigitte, and then would you be playing D-Ding as a diva, or would you be playing a different flex tank, which we'll get to in a second. Youngjin also did play some main tank. They're both flex players, but Youngjin primarily plays Brigitte. But Youngjin started out as a main tank player, so he could play a little bit of main tank, but I don't expect him to. But there's a reason why I think it's possible that he could. But we'll get to that in a second. That's it for the Kongdu Panthera teams. But there are, of course, some other players on the roster. Kongdu Panthera teams, Kongdu Panthera players. There are some other players on the roster. First, we have Diem, as in like Carpe Diem. He played for Lucky Future Zenith, a Chinese contenders team that won the past 2 seasons of Contenders China. It was primarily Korean roster, if not an entirely Korean roster, but he is a hit scan player. And that's a bit interesting because that overlaps with Dia plays. Diem is good with Widowmaker, with McCree, with Sombra, but that's also kind of what Dia plays, so their hero pool is largely similar. And when you're building a primarily South Korean roster, are you going to go with the Chinese player who probably doesn't have as good of communication skills with the other Korean players, or are you going to go with the South Korean player who knows how to speak Korean fluently, can be better at communications with Korean teammates? It'll be interesting to see who plays more. I kind of think that Dia stayed on the roster for a reason. They knew they were going with a primarily Korean roster, and they kept Dia. So Dia has shown that he's not the worst at communication, but I'm interested to see where it goes. The final player that they have is Guardian, who played for Toronto Esports in North America. He played with them until halfway through the second season. Guardian primarily played Diva. Like, that's all he really played on that team. And we'll see whether or not he takes that role from Gregory. If, who knows? A lot of people are, of course, saying that he is going to be the person competing with Gregory. But it also could realistically be D-Ding as well. Now, he plays Diva, and he also plays Pharah, so he might not be consistently on that role, but he could be competing for that backup spot as well. I personally expect Gregory to get the starting spot, at least at the beginning of the season, maybe over time. She starts to lose that spot, but I expect at the beginning of the season for Gregory to hold that starting spot. I don't see why they'd go with Guardian right off the bat. Maybe he impresses, but I think Gregory has that experience. She can be a leader with that team. Now, I don't think she will be the leader. I think the leader will likely be Fearless. I think he'll be the guy kind of operating everything. I think he'll be the captain. I don't really know why they have team captains, but I think he, if anyone would be the team captain, I think it would be him. So this roster, I think, is an improvement. And I don't think it's that hard to say this is an improvement, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a team that didn't win a single game, right? But the primary reason why this is an improvement, in my opinion, comes down to one major thing, and that is that this is a roster built from a team that found success. The head coach, 4 of the players, and then you bring 2 players in from other regions who had some success, who have proven that they're good. You keep your best players from the team before it, cut all the players. You keep your best players from last season. It's an impressive roster. Now, will they find early and immediate success? I don't know. A lot of these players, don't have Overwatch League experience. But a lot of these players also have contenders experience. You have teams, like Kongdu Panthera, who the majority of this roster is, that were very successful in contenders this past season in Korea, which is like the most competitive contender scene. And they got second. So it's a good team. A lot of good players on that team are now in the Overwatch League. That can't be understated. This is a solid team that is now moving into the Overwatch League, but it's an adjustment, and they have to adjust to playing in the Overwatch League, as do these players that are not from Kongdu Panthera, Indium, and Guardian. But overall, I think this team will be a better team than we saw. They might not find immediate success. They might not win their first 2-3 games, for example. But I think they will win games. They have to go up against a new set of teams. They have to play them, twice? So they have to play 8 games against brand new teams in their division, and then also play 4 games against other new teams that are not in their division, with a primarily South Korean roster, which obviously we have seen the dominance of South Korean players in Overwatch. They just won the World Cup, right? That is a really, really, really big thing for this team, that this team is primarily South Korean. I think this team will adjust quickly. I think this team could find early success. They could be like the New York Excelsior. The New York Excelsior were a lot of players that were good, that people knew about. Obviously, Sabiobi played on the World Cup team. Mono played on the World Cup team, but like people didn't know who Jonak was. He had never played in a professional scene. Pine, people knew, but he wasn't like fantastic. Whatever. Libero, same thing. Like these were players that people didn't really know, and they came on the scene and were dominant. They made all four stage finals. They won two of them. They had the best regular season record. So maybe we're looking at a team of obviously players that are much more well known in the overall scheme because they played for Kangdu Panthera. And I think we're going to look at this team at the end of the season in a much better position than we saw them at the end of last season. And obviously, look, they can't lose another 40 games because there's only 28 games for them to lose. But I don't think they're going to lose 28 games. I think they might have a winning record. They might not. But I think this team is going to be on the up. I think they're going to improve. I think they could make some moves mid-season. I think they could still sign some veteran players that have yet to be signed. At least to our knowledge, they've yet to be signed. There's still some stuff they could do to work on this team. I think they need to get another main tank player. That's the big thing. They only have one right now. You cannot win with one main tank player, in my opinion. You need to have reliable backups in that main tank role. Now, obviously, look, you don't need to. You had a team like the LA Gladiators where pretty much the entire time that they had Fissure was playing and Fissure was dominant. So you don't need to replace Fearless in games, but I think if you only have one main tank, you run into an issue if Fearless gets sick, if Fearless gets injured in any way, you're hurting yourself. So I think that the Shanghai Dragons need to look to get a main tank somewhere. With or without Overwatch experience, doesn't matter. I think that they should sign another one unless they plan on having Youngjin play main tank, but he's mostly going to be playing Brigitte if the meta doesn't change too much when Ashe enters the meta, but I don't expect it to change too much anytime soon. But yeah, that's this roster. That's my thoughts on this roster. I'll link to everything that I consulted in the description. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I think Shanghai will do well. In terms of where I think they'll finish as a whole, I think I'm going to do that late, like the end of the series. We're going to do a video just kind of going over Pacific and Atlantic, and then kind of playoffs and all that kind of stuff before the season starts. So that will be a thing that we'll jump into towards the end when it's a little bit closer and a little bit clearer what these rosters are. And I'll kind of do a video at the end of the season when I talk about those to talk about any other roster changes that some of these teams made that I didn't cover. But that is everything. If you enjoyed, if you have feedback, let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed, like and subscribe. Please consider it. Friday, the next episode will go up, hopefully, and it will be about the Florida Mayhem. But until then, thank you for watching. I will see you all next time. I hope you enjoyed, and have a nice day.